and Point Pleasant and history and a lot of other great and fascinating things. So, Jeff, are you there?
Yep. How you doing, Ted?
Very good, very good. I'm so glad you could join me today.
Well, I appreciate you having me on the show.
Oh, absolutely. As you heard in my introduction, I'm absolutely fascinated by Mothman, and especially since Mothman is kind of like a it's almost an enigma even amongst the paranormal phenomena in some ways, because it doesn't really fit into any kind of category that so-called paranormal researchers would try to fit it into.
Yeah, that's true. It's there's so many things going on at that time with not just the Mothman sightings and encounters and things like that, but like you mentioned before, there was the Ohio Valley in general in the 60s, the mid to late 60s, was just a hotbed for UFO activity. And then the Mothman stuff started happening. Then you had the Men in Black stuff started popping up. And then you had the Silver Bridge collapse, which all happened within a couple-year time frame. So, it was a compressed piece of history right there. There's a lot going on.
Can you tell us how you became interested in Mothman, and if your interest in the paranormal goes beyond this, what other things are you interested in?
Well, I grew up in Point Pleasant, and I remember being in it was either junior high or high school, and reading some of John Keel's Mothman Prophecies book, and it was kind of neat because it was like all this stuff took place right pretty much on my street. A lot of the original witnesses lived there. I lived about 4 doors away from Linda Scarberry and her family, and her husband, her soon-to-be husband, lived across the street, Roger Scarberry. They were kind of like childhood sweethearts, They got married, and, of course, they were in the car that first night. And so as I got a little bit older, started reading Keel's book. And then, when I was in the music business, I owned a chain of record stores, and of course, being in Point Pleasant, I carried a line of my own shirts and things like that, and I started working on that first book in the late '90s, which was Facts Behind the Legend. I co-authored that book with Donnie Surgeon Jr. But it just, to me, and a lot like what you were saying, it was just a fascinating subject because so many people encountered it. It wasn't just 2 or 3 people, so it kind of had more validity to it, And I got to talking to some of these people, and it was kind of a big challenge for me to get to some of the people that never would talk about it, and which was a big hurdle because when all this happened, a lot of those people just clammed up. They were ridiculed, made fun of, and things like that. So it was a little tough to get some of those people to sit down with me and tell me their story. So it was a challenge, and at the same time, it was kind of it was an interest. I think the older I get, the more interested I am in history, and I always looked at that as a historical time, for Point Pleasant in general. So, and I'm still, it's still a fascinating subject, and I meet a lot of different people. As far as anything else in the paranormal, really, I've never really had much interest in some of the other stuff. I get billed, as being in the paranormal field, and we get a lot of paranormal investigators that come to the museum and things like that. So it's a unique position to be in because you get a chance to talk to a lot of different people and stuff.
Yes. Well, you talk about history, and of course history is a very important part of the Mothman phenomenon, especially considering that it happened in the late 1960s, which is one of the most tumultuous times in American history.
Yeah.
I mean, you had assassination of Martin Luther King and Bobby Kennedy, and
Right.
you just had all kinds of things that were going on. In fact, Project Blue Book was going about its business
Right.
at that time, and there was a lot of interest in UFOs in general around the country. I think that might have been like the heyday for that sort of thing, for just weirdness in general, and
Yeah.
around the country, and to have so much of it concentrated in West Virginia like that, especially as you said, right in your own neighborhood. I could see that if I had been there, I probably would be in a similar position as you. But
I was only about 5 years old when all this happened, and I wish I could have been a little older to remember, some of the stuff, but I remember, my dad had some of the magazines, like the UFO magazines and things like that, because he was kind of interested in it too. He worked up at the National Guard Armory in the TNT area, which is where a lot of those sightings took place, and he always had kind of an interest in it. But it's nice to talk to people that are older that remember it just like it just happened and stuff, the details and things like that. But it was definitely a different time. It was more of a conservative time, with a lot of the people. A lot of people were afraid to report, their sightings and things like that. So, but it was a different time.
I think maybe you might have run across a lot of that that sort of insular community idea where everybody sort of keeps to themselves.
Oh yeah.
I think
there's
that's
a lot
true.
of people that I've still tried to talk to that I probably never will be able to get them to open up about what happened. They've kind of made it clear that they admit that they saw it, but that's pretty much it. They're not going to go into detail about it.
Yeah, and I think if they wouldn't talk to a town son like yourself,
right.
they're not going to talk to anybody. So.
Yeah, and I've had several pending interviews and sit downs and everything for that second book that were really solid pieces of evidence, and of course I have to respect their privacy, and I even offered to present it in an anonymous fashion, and they were they weren't even agreeable with that. And the funny thing is, I know these people,
right?
But they knew the books would be worldwide, and I guess they just didn't want the attention,
Yes.
So.
Well, I think that's a testament to the fact that Mothman, the phenomenon itself, is so fundamental to these people, the experience that
All right, yeah.
it definitely leaves a mark on them, for good or bad, that makes them not want to talk about it, and still affects them years later.
Most of the people that I've talked to, not all of them, and some of the people that I've interviewed totally thought that it was just a giant bird, that it was a huge bird that was indigenous to this area, but then the other ones that I talked to said it wasn't a bird, it was more than that, and they'll pretty much tell you what they saw, but there's different angles on it, it's that's what makes it interesting,
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Well, of course, one that a lot of people would be familiar with is the sandhill crane theory.
Right.
For what that was.
Well, that sandhill crane theory just made a lot of those original witnesses just clam up even more, because they had went ahead and told about what they had encountered, and then to kind of calm the storm, so to speak, they called in some of it was a professor, I think, from West Virginia University, who came in and said, well, no, it was just nothing but a sandhill crane, and of course that offended a lot of those people that had went out of their way to put their reputation on the line and stuff, and made them look stupid. So
would have offended me too.
Yeah, if you
somebody told me that.
Yeah, and like I said, there's different theories and different approaches to what people were seeing, but and there again, I've talked to people, that said what they saw was just an enormous bird, but then again, I've talked to people who said it was, a man that had wings and red eyes and stuff. So, there's different takes as to what it was.
Yes. Well, let me take a moment here. I did mention the book, and you mentioned your other book that you co-wrote. I'm gonna mention them both again. The one that I have is Mothman Behind the Red Eyes by Jeff Walmsley, and that one was printed in 2005.
Right.
You can find the books on MothmanLives.com. You can also find Jeff Walmsley's books on Amazon.com as well. The second book that Jeff mentioned, he co-wrote with Donnie Sargent Jr., and that's called Mothman, The Facts Behind the Legend, and that's from 2001. Also, you can find that on Amazon.com as well. You can also check it MothmanLives.com, which also has other merchandise there as well. Maybe you can tell us a little bit, because people who are familiar with the Mothman story, they know that Mothman was seen in West Virginia and what have you, but it was associated mostly with what's called by the locals the TNT area outside of Point Pleasant. Maybe you can give the listeners a little historical background on what the TNT area is, and we can get a feel for the place and the area there.
Okay. Well, basically, when World War II broke out, you had the military came in. As a matter of fact, the same company who constructed Roswell was the people who came in and built the TNT area. And the TNT area got its name from actually it's where they manufactured TNT for the war effort during World War II. And it's about 3,000 acres up there. It was basically a city, within itself. Very high security. It was a 24/7 operation. They were just churning out all kinds of explosives and TNT and things like that. As soon as the war ended, they just pretty much uprooted and took off. They left it up there. All the buildings and the structures and things like that. During the 60s, it was pretty much vacated, but it's where a lot of the kids would go up, hang out. They were out of the city limits. It's about 5 or 6 miles outside of the city limits of Point Pleasant. But it was also a place where they could. They could get away from the city, and especially the sheriff and deputies and things like that. Did a lot of drag racing and things like that, but even today, a lot of the structures are still there. But there was one particular building up there, which during the war effort it was called the North Power Plant, and you can see some pictures and things like that on the internet if you just do a Google search or whatever. But that was the building that a lot of those initial sightings were in and around that building. It's about 3 stories tall. At one time had the big smokestacks. They slowly disassembled those buildings over the years, and then I think in '92 or '93 they just pretty much demolished it. They tore it down because a lot of people were inside there messing around, and it was just a big liability for the state. So they came in and tore it down. But the original witnesses, all through the 66, 67 area, there were a lot of sightings around that building. People thought that if it was a large bird or a crane, that maybe it was kind of roosting in the top of that building, on the roof or one of the top rooms or whatever. But it was a really eerie-looking building. I mean, it just looked like something right out of a movie set. And I wish it was still there, so people could get an idea of, the feel and the overall size of it and stuff. But thanks to some of the people I went to high school with, they tore it down because they were up there hanging off the top floor by their ankles and painting their names on the top. And there were actually a couple people that jumped off of the top of the building and survived.
Wow.
And, that may have been due to, whatever they were doing up there and stuff. But the state came in and took those buildings down. There was a north power plant, and then on the other side of the road there was a south power plant. What happened in the long run was the explosives and all that kind of stuff contaminated the ground up there. So during the 80s, that was an EPA cleanup site. They came in and took off, I think it was about 3 inches of topsoil. But that's the TNT area is synonymous, with a lot of those sightings. Now, there were people seeing it in town, across the river, in Ohio. So it wasn't just in the TNT area, but that's where most people were looking for it. They were up in that TNT area a lot, and they still are today.
And you have a couple of pictures in your book.
Yeah.
Eyes of the Mothman of the North Power Plant.
Yeah.
And in fact, the very first case that you have in there involves a witness who actually went into the North Power Plant and encountered what he thought was Bob Bosworth. Talks about his encounter inside the North Power Plant.
Yeah, that was about maybe a week or two after Linda Scarberry and the others were in the car.
I'll tell you what, that's a really eerie story
to
hear him tell that. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's a footnote on that story is the guy. It was him and his buddy went in there, Alan Coates. And I remember when I was working on that book, and I had to call Alan. I had known him when I was a kid. Actually, I delivered papers to about some of these people, but I remember delivering papers to Alan Coates and his mom and dad. But I had to call him to get permission to use his name in my book, And when I talked to him, I just said, well, do you remember much about it, and things like that. He wasn't going to do a full-blown interview, but he told me that he did a tour of Vietnam before that. When he came back, that's when they saw this thing, and he said that he's seen a lot of scary things in Vietnam, but nothing scared him like that up there in that North Power Plant. So I kind of thought, well, whatever it was, Now Bob passed away about 2 years ago, and but he was very reluctant to talk. But I finally cornered him and got him to sit down with me and talk about that and stuff. But that was he was one of the kind of the unsung interviews there when all that happened. He never really got much publicity or press out like the other ones did, so he kind of stayed under the radar there for a while. But that was a good one. That was a pretty close encounter there.
Yes, and very eerily described, and much the same as most of the encounters with Mothman. You think like when I mentioned before about paranormal phenomenon, usually like some of the more common categories of things usually have some ultimate resolution or something like this, or they present themselves in a way that people can garner some kind of knowledge out of them.
Exactly.
And it's sort of like when people encounter Mothman, it's just sort of like it's there. That's it.
Yeah, you're right. And most of those people weren't real thrilled about it either.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it left a tremendous mark on these people. Yeah.
And
which is
to
just
the point
amazing.
where a lot of them just didn't want to talk about it. With Linda Scarberry. And as a matter of fact, now Linda just passed away about 2 weeks ago. I don't know if you knew that yet or not.
Yes, as a matter of fact, I was going to bring that up. As you mentioned her earlier.
And she was one of the key eyewitnesses because she's the only one out of the four in the car that night that really have sat down and did any interviews. The rest of them, they just, I don't think it'll ever happen. As far as getting a good solid sit down with them, but And she told me on several occasions. I stayed in touch with her. She lived in Point Pleasant, still lived there, and she just told me, point blank. She said, I wish I'd never ever saw that thing.
Mm.
She said, I wish somebody else would have saw it, which they did. Other people did see it, but
right.
She just wasn't jumping up and down with joy about seeing this thing. And most of the people I've talked to, were they just couldn't really rationalize what it was.
Mm.
If they could have said, well, I know exactly what it was, but they just were puzzled for years,
right,
as to how to explain really what it was or anything.
Did anybody ever relate to you? Any of the witnesses ever relate to you? Any other weird phenomenon that they ever experienced, like after their sighting?
Yeah. Well,
can you give us
some
some
particular
examples there for our listeners?
Linda, after all that happened, everything was really, just always, kind of, I guess, paranoid would be the word. She said that she just always felt a presence. They lived in a mobile home at the time, so the TV would start messing up, and she'd hear squeaking and squawking noises, footsteps or footprints on the top of the roof. Some of the other witnesses, mentioned the same thing. One lady in particular, Marcella Bennett, she's in the book too, and she passed away about 3 years ago. Lived in a two-story house. She would never sleep upstairs. She always slept downstairs, and she wouldn't drive at night. She stopped driving after dark altogether. So, and then of course, the Men in Black stuff, which that started happening to some of them. Strange phone calls. Even John Keel, told me about some of the strange calls and camera film missing, all kinds of stuff like that. That would happen. That happened after all this was going on. So
yeah.
And then there was a few witnesses that were just like Tom Urey, for example. It's in the book. He told me, he said, what I saw was a bird. Chased him in his car. Caused him to run off the road and things like that. But that's like I said, that's the different type of witnesses and stuff.
Yes, and I think we'll also get into the Men in Black, right, and some of the other phenomenon that went on in association with Mothman there. And as you mentioned, I think John Keel was probably the principal investigator. Well, Gray Barker had been involved as well, but
they were both working together, and they had some sort of a disagreement or whatever. But they were supposed to co-author that book, the first book, and then Keel went his separate way, and then of course Gray Barker did the Silver Bridge book, and but. Just by knowing Keel and how eccentric he was, and I could see where they wouldn't get along. Keel was, pretty opinionated and stuff. So he never went into details as to what really happened or anything. But I think they just felt that they should kind of go their separate ways and do their own thing.
Well, kind of in just anecdotally, like from my own experience, I've found that paranormal researchers don't often make good partners when it comes to investigation.
Yeah. It's almost like musicians.
Yes.
I mean, I've played music since I was 15, and once the egos and the music styles and all that,
exactly.
It's like it works for a little while, and then it gets to the point where it's like I need to do my own thing, and so, but yeah, you're right. It's I've always looked at that area there as almost like being a musician. It's kind of has its same qualities and stuff.
Yeah, I think that's a really good analogy, actually.
Yeah.
You look at the history of certain bands, you can see members coming and going, and the egos coming in and changing things around. So.
Right.
It's kind of rare, really, whenever you see paranormal researchers team up for long for anything in general. Yeah.
You don't see it a whole lot. I mean, and I've tried to always stay out of that, any type of discontent or whatever you want to call it.
Right.
I really don't consider myself a paranormal researcher because I've pretty much stuck to this one area and stuff. As far as ghosts and apparitions and things like that, we get a lot. Like I said, we get a lot of those people that come to Point Pleasant. They come to the festival, and that's fine, But I've never had any interest in being billed as a paranormal expert. My books are all basically a lot of interviews and archives and stuff.
Absolutely.
And that way people can pick those up and look at them and decide whether they think it's a bunch of bull or if there's something to it. Same way at the museum. I mean,
yes.
We're not standing at the door when you come in and cramming, information down your throat as to what this thing was or whatever.
And I think that's probably the best way to go because I don't think anybody really has a good answer.
No,
I mean a definitive one anyway. I mean there are good answers, but there's no way to know which one is the right one or not. So.
Yeah, and I get asked that all the time too when I do interviews. What do you think it was? What is your opinion on it as what it was and stuff? And I'm just like in the crowd with everybody else on that, because it's it's kind of up in the air. I don't know. I just know that they saw something. I mean, I can guarantee you that they definitely run across something that was out of the ordinary.
Yeah, from your
talking to those people.
From your work, I definitely get the idea that you your primary job and focus is to bring forward information for historical purposes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you don't really inject a lot of your own opinion as far as what particular is going on there.
The way I look at it is it's sort of like Fox News. We report, you decide, because a lot of people since Linda passed away and stuff, somebody like yourself is never going to get a chance to talk to her or some of those other people. So I thought it would be cool, if I could sit down with them and get their stories and now her interview's in the first book. Donnie Donnie actually sat down with her and talked to her. But those interviews and stuff will be a permanent record as to their testimony as to what happened. But those people, when that happened, were probably in their 20s, and that's been 45 years ago.
Right.
So now it's starting to die off. I mean, some of those people are passing away. I can think of probably 4 or 5 just in the past 2 or 3 years that have passed away. So
yes. Well, you've certainly done a great service by getting these by getting all of this information together, and I can really recommend this book for someone who's interested in Mothman because
I appreciate that.
Yeah, well, as I said, I mean, it has a tremendous amount of information in it. I mean, it really is.
There's a lot of detail in there.
Yeah,
I asked some detailed questions, and
absolutely
at least try to. But then there's always questions you think about after the fact, after you've done those books and it's been published and everything. You're like, man, I wish I would have asked them about this or that. And I would go back to her all the time and ask her different things and stuff. But
well, I know when I'm done doing the interview with you today, I'll be 10 minutes after I'm finished. I'll be like, damn, why didn't I ask Jeff that question?
Well, we'll do another interview sometime.
Well, someone in the chat room wants you to tell us about the festival. Now, I am going to bust my leg if I have to get down there this year for the festival.
You're in Pittsburgh, right?
Yeah, I'm practically next door. So
we get a lot of people in the museum from Pittsburgh. There was some people in there this past week.
Yeah, and I want to come down for like a day or two. I want to check out the festival. I want to check out the museum and get to meet you and some of the other people down there that I know who go. So I'm gonna. Like I said, I'm going to break my leg if I have to get down there. But why don't you tell us what you have planned this year for the festival so far? Just give us a general idea of like how it's set up and what kind of things go on there.
Well, the festival, we always have it in September on the third weekend. At least we have for the past 8 years, I think, 8 or 9 years. That way with the weather, you know, it's not too hot, it's not too cold. It's kind of like right in between. But we have the festival. It's turned into almost like a 3-day event, a Friday evening, Saturday all day, and then Sunday all-day event. And we have it right downtown on Main Street. We started, this will be the 10th one this year. This will be the 10th anniversary of the first one. And we started that festival way back when with maybe, I don't know, 300, 400 showed up, and now it's like 4,000 or 5,000 people show up. And what we do is we have all kinds of vendors. There's, you know, merchandise, authors, paranormal groups. We have guest speakers. Andy Colvin was there, I think, last year, year before. Might have been the year before. And we have like an open type forum for those guest speakers, and people can meet them and talk to them, ask questions, you know, question and answer sessions. We have like live bands that are playing, and all kinds of stuff like that. We do a hay ride on Saturday night up in the TNT area, which is pretty cool. The bus tours, basically, we do out of the museum there. We do those pretty much year-round, but we do them a few more during the festival and stuff. And also we do some tram rides that go through town because, you know, history is pretty big in Point Pleasant. You know, we've got, like I said, the Mothman Museum. We've got the River Museum, got Twin-Dewey Park, you know, a lot of history with the battles there in Twin-Dewey Park. And so there's a lot to do and see. You've got the murals that they just painted on the flood wall, real nice river theater there and stuff. So it's a pretty cool event, and hopefully this year the weather will cooperate. Every year we've been okay with the weather. So and then we try to keep everything updated on that MothmanFestival.com website. So as far as the guest speakers that'll be there this year, we're still trying to line all that, you know, that stuff.
Yeah, well, it's kind of early for that, yeah.
John Keel had actually came to a couple of those festivals. He would always show up unannounced, though. But, you know, I would sit there and try to get him to commit, and he never would, but then he would just show up out of the blue. So, you know, we were afraid to really, you know, bill him as going to be there because we thought, well, he's about as unpredictable as the Mothman himself. So we figured if we Bill John Keel is showing up, then something would come, he wouldn't be there or something. You know?
Right. So. That sounds very much like John Keel.
Yeah.
Having read his book.
He did make it to a few of them, and of course, you know, he lived in Manhattan, still lived in New York, but he would drive to Point Pleasant by himself and just show up. But so I think the dates on that this year are the 18th and 19th, 18th, 19th, 20th. It's that third weekend there. I should know those dates by now, but you know.
Well, hey, you got other stuff you got going on too.
Yeah.
I noticed on the Mothman Festival website it said something about an explosive cache blowing up there in the TNT area last year. Do you know?
About a year ago, almost.
Yeah. Do you know any more about that? Like what happened? And
well, you know, the open igloos. There's about 100 igloos up there, and they call them igloos because they're concrete storage units that were built during World War II. But they look like igloos, but they're covered with foliage and trees and all that, because the whole premise for that was as if Japan or Germany would have got over here, they would have flown over that area up there and never seen anything from the air. And they're still disguised. You know, you can walk right past one and not know one that you're there. But there's over 100 of those up there, and they still haven't opened it back up. But last May, what the state will do is they'll lease some of those out to private companies. And somebody was storing something they shouldn't have been storing in there, and one of them exploded. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning, I think. And just to give you an idea of the magnitude of the explosion, those walls and those igloos are about 4 foot thick.
Wow.
Okay, and it blew the complete top out.
Wow.
There was nothing left. There was nothing left. So if somebody would have been standing, anywhere close to it, it probably would have just obliterated them. So what happened was that then the ATF came in and got involved in the state fire marshal and the state police and everything. And so I guess the guy who owned the company that was storing that stuff, he was in a lot of caca,
I guess
so. Some deep caca. I don't know if they ever caught up with him or not, but so then that meant it was off limits for us. We still do the bus tours through there. We just can't get out and walk around and look and stuff until they lift that ban. But it was last May, so it's been almost a year ago that went off. And there's actually a local guy here that went up there and filmed that igloo. If you go on YouTube and if you type in, I was on there one night, TNT igloo explosion. He does a panoramic. He stands there with his video camera and walks around in a circle and shows the whole top of that, how it got blown out.
Wow.
But it's on YouTube because I've seen it on there, and I think the key words would be TNT area igloo explosion or something like that.
Oh, excellent.
As a matter of fact, the same guy, he went in the North Power Plant before they tore it down. This would have been probably in probably late 80s, early 90s, and walked through it, and it's on YouTube as well.
Oh, great. That's good.
What's that guy? What is his last name? He was younger than me in school, but I don't know. I mean, he went into there and shot all kinds of footage. It gives you an idea of how big that plant was. A lot of concrete catwalks and all kinds of stuff in there. And, of course, they had big generators that ran in there during World War II, so there's all kinds of these empty pits, and you can see where all the machinery was. But Don, I can't think of his last name. I keep wanting to say Maynard. Don McDade, I think was his name. So that might help you find it too. But he was in the right place at the right time,
Yes.
And all that footage and stuff.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I'm definitely going to check that out on YouTube and see if I can find those videos. Yeah. And you also have the museum as well. Tell us how the museum's set up and what you got going on there.
Well, let's see, the museum, can you hear that in the phone line, that cell phone signal? It must be one of my cell phones. Can you hear it?
Like a little intermittent sort of staticky sound.
Let me get on my other phone here real quick. Hold on a second.
Okay, sure.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. That was a wireless phone that I was on before, and it seems like every time I'm talking, I start hearing that. I hope that's what it is. Maybe it might be the Men in Black out here or something.
Well, we're going to get to them in a minute.
Yeah. As far as the museum goes, basically what happened with that was I had collected a lot of archives, from my books and stuff. And I had those record stores up until about 2003, 2004. Of course, the music industry just took a big nosedive with Napster and CD burning and all that stuff. So I had all those archives in those stores and everything. So I got out of the music business there. But there was a guy from Katanning, Pennsylvania, which is where they filmed the movie. I think it's maybe about an hour and a half from Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I know where it is.
Yeah, that's where they filmed the Mothman Prophecies.
Yes.
He would come to the festival every year and bring. This guy was just infatuated with the whole movie, the Mothman story, and he bought all these props from the movie set. He would get this. He was loaded anyway. He'd go down there and buy police uniforms that Laura Linney wore. The phones that Richard Gere used in the hotel scene, all that stuff. So he would come down to the festival every year and set up his display and stuff, and people really got a kick out of looking at all of it. It got to the point in later years where there was a couple years where he couldn't come, and he kind of just faded out of it a little bit and stuff. So he just called me up one day out of the blue and said, "Look, this is a big tax write-off for me, and it will help you. So he donated all of it.
Oh, wow. Isn't that great?
We're talking a lot of money, and he just called me. He said, my accountant will do this as a tax write-off for me. It'll be a donation to you and who else helps me. And that's where that idea for the museum came up. But John Keel had always told me that a museum, well, he liked the idea of the festival too.
Mm-hmm.
But, the museum idea went over pretty good with him too. So I kind of bounce ideas off of him from time to time and, see what he thought. But so that's how that started. We've been there about 6 years. And we started off with some basic stuff, but I just, constantly picking things up and some rare movie props and a lot of the archives and newspaper clippings and all kinds of stuff like that. So,
mm-hmm. Is there an admission charge for the museum?
Yeah, it's like we've kept it the same. We've never raised anything. It's $3 for adults and $1 for kids and under 12, I think, and that basically helps us with to pay the electric and pay to have somebody in there and things like that. I have a gift shop in there, with my merchandise and books
mm-hmm.
and stuff like that. So.
What a great deal! That's a real.
Yeah, you still get people complain about $3.
I can't imagine.
Yeah, I know, and I'm thinking, what is the deal? I mean, but and then a lot of people just walk in and just kind of look around and kind of are clueless and then walk out, But it's got a quirky feel to it. I mean, it's unique. I mean, it's not like you're walking in the Smithsonian or anything, but
mm-hmm.
We kind of build it, and we still do as a museum/research center, where you can come in and sit down and just kind of go through some of the stuff, and we let people take pictures, and every now and then we'll end up on YouTube or something like that. But I had a film crew in there this past Wednesday. Well, it seems like there's one there every week. It was a bunch of college students from Long Island, New York, doing a college project, a video on documentary on Mothman.
Oh, nice.
And the week before that was the Discovery Channel from Canada. They came in and filmed some interviews and stuff like that. It's for William Shatner's show called Weird or What.
Oh, I didn't know he had a new show. Is that a new show?
Actually, I think it's been out for a while, but it plays in Canada a lot.
Well, then maybe that's why I didn't hear about it. Yeah.
There again, you go on YouTube and type in William Shatner Weird or What, and it's got some of the episodes.
I'll make a note of that.
Of course, he didn't show up. He wasn't with them. He basically just narrates it. Just sort of a kind of a show where he talks a little bit about the phenomenon and stuff like that. So, but. Yeah, somebody emailed me the other day and said he's worth over $1 billion now with a B.
William Shatner.
Yeah.
Well,
and then somebody else made the comment and said the reason is because he owns most of the stock in Priceline.com.
That's interesting.
The website. So.
Yeah. Why wouldn't
live long and prosper?
Yeah. He made a good career out of emoting. That's for sure.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And even in later years, coming to mock himself, which was kind of funny.
I told Jeremy, the guy that works in the museum for me, it would have been funny if he would have came in there and we could have mocked him, and kind of talked like he did on Star Trek.
Damn it, man! I need more.
Yeah. He'd probably just look at you and say, "Security, get down in my face." Do you imagine how many times he runs into that on a daily basis,
That's probably why he doesn't go up in public too much.
Probably, yeah. It would get old after about 20 years of it,
I'll tell you an interesting story about William Shatner, just as a little side note here. A few years ago, I don't even know what I was researching, but I never got a chance to follow up on this. But I was doing some looking into William Shatner and stuff like that. And came across a book that somebody wrote about him. It was a biography, I think, of William Shatner. And in the little synopsis that I read, I'm going to have to look for that again because I've been thinking about it recently and wanted to get it. And he talked about William Shatner taking a bike trip across the United States and how he encountered a UFO in the Southwest United States. And it's something that people don't. I've never heard anybody talk about before.
Oh, really? Huh?
Yeah. So I just wondered, what what that experience represented for him and all that stuff, especially considering he was involved with Star Trek and all that kind of stuff. Which just just a little.
I wonder if that happened before or after.
Yeah,
Star Trek.
Exactly, and I don't know. Like I said, I just saw that little blurb, and I'm going to have to do a look again for that because that would be an interesting little connection, little angle between the two.
Huh.
Yeah, so that's something for people to check out if they want to.
Yeah.
But we'll get back onto the subject now instead of talking about, damn it, Snotty, I need more engine power.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about some of the other witnesses. One of the other witnesses that I thought was a really fascinating one that you have encountered, that you have in Behind the Red Eyes, is Marcella Bennett.
Yeah.
Maybe you could tell us about that encounter because I think that's really creepy and scary.
Yeah, she come pretty close to it. I'd say out of all the people I talked to, what had happened on that is it's kind of strange. Her maiden name is Walmsley, and
really?
A lot of people, her maiden name is Walmsley because it talks about, if you look at the newspaper clippings and stuff, she went up there with her brother Raymond Walmsley and Raymond's wife. So a lot of people always look at that and they say, "Oh, you related to some of the witnesses and stuff," but there's two sets of Walmsleys here, in Point Pleasant. So I'm not related to her. If I am, it'd be very distantly. And then also there was a Walmsley that was killed on the bridge when the bridge fell, Marvin Walmsley, and that was totally another. So I always get asked that a lot. Like, oh, that's how you got the inside scoop. You're related to him, but that's not the case. But anyways, what happened with Marcella is her sister Virginia lived. Her and her husband and kids lived up in the TNT area near where all this stuff took place. So Linda and the other three were in the car that first night, November 15th. Well, the following night, everybody caught wind of all this stuff going on, and Marcella told me that they just thought it was a big joke. They just thought it was somebody up there scaring people. So they were going to go up there to her sister's house and scare the kids because, she had a bunch of nieces and nephews that lived in the house. So she said their plan was to drive up there and they were going to, mess with the kids a little bit and scare them and stuff. So they went up there.
That sounds like something that people would have done back in those days.
Oh,
I remember when I was a kid, the adults would do that kind of thing to us all the time.
Yeah, and that's why a lot of people thought, it's just somebody up there pranking everybody and all this and that. But
right.
So they went up there, pecked on the windows, blah, 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 had their fun and everything. And they were getting ready to leave. And she had a 2-year-old daughter, whom I went to school with. She was a few years younger than me in school. 2-year-old daughter that she was carrying. When she was walking back out to the car, and it was dark, and she said that as she reached down to unlock the car door, this gray figure stood up beside of the car, and she said she just remembered looking at the feet and just working her way up, and she said it was tall, but she said it was standing with its head hunkered down in between its shoulders, just looking at her. Now, I asked her about the red eyes, and she said she did not see any red eyes, but she said it was tall and it was a very broad chested figure, And that's when she got scared and she took back towards the house, and when she was running back to the house, she tripped and fell, landed on her daughter, and she said she could hear the wings flapping in the background. And she was afraid it was going to come up from behind them and maybe pick up the kid or do something to him or whatever. At this point, all her nieces and nephews were out in the yard just freaking out, running and screaming and everything else. And they all got inside the house, and she said it actually walked up onto the porch. They shut all the curtains, pulled the blinds and everything, but she said it whatever it was came up onto the porch and stayed for a few seconds, and then she said you could hear it flying off.
Wow.
And they called the sheriff's deputies, but remember, it's 6-7 miles out of town, so by the time they got up there, it was long gone. But that was just a night after Lyndon had seen it.
Wow.
And, but she said it was very tall, and she told me she just thought it was somebody dressed up in a khaki-looking clothes. She said it was almost a grayish-brown look to it. And but she said its head was down, hunkered down in its shoulders, almost like a bird, a giant bird.
Yeah. That's immediately what I thought of when you said that in the description that you gave.
And I did get a chance to talk to some of those. Her son, I graduated with her son. He passed away a few years ago too. The whole family. I think there's just a few of them left. But I just, when I was in high school with those people, I never really made the connection that their parents were the ones involved in the story. But I stopped him one day and talked to him, and he was in the house, when this thing come up on the porch. And I asked him if he remembered anything about it or anything. And he said all he remembered was, the mass confusion and people yelling and screaming and crying. But he said he remembered looking up at the window and seeing a shadow go past the window. And that's all he remembered about it. So there again, that was real close to where the igloos are now. And that was just the night after. So, for about 2 or 3 weeks, you had real heavy sighting reports and stuff. And Marcella, she's the one I was talking about earlier, that she wouldn't drive at night after that.
Yes.
Her husband worked midnight shift and stuff. And
I think she might mention that, and I think you might have mentioned that in the interview here.
And she was a really tough lady. I mean, she could care less what people thought of as far as her interviews and telling people what she saw. And she told me point blank, she said, I know what I saw it with my own eyes, and if people believe it, fine. If they don't believe it, it doesn't bother me, but she said, I know what I saw. Real tough spirited lady, and her interview, I talked to her on previous accounts and stuff, but her story never wavered, and Linda's never did either. Over the years, things kind of get watered down and people change things. And, the way I always looked at it, though, if that whole thing, if it was some sort of a hoax, surely by now somebody would have come forth and said, let's just put an end to all the speculation. Here's what happened. But you're right. Kids were up there spooking people and jumping out in front of cars and all kinds of stuff like that. I've heard pretty much every theory that you can ever possibly conjure up.
Oh, I'm sure.
All kinds of stuff.
From the most mundane to the most bizarre, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, the military experiment with the jetpack. The James Bond movie with the guy flying around with the jetpack on. And when you think about it, this was during Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
They're experimenting with all kinds of stuff. They got a guy with a jetpack on and goggles flying around, and flying over a car, up to 90 miles an hour coming down Route 62. Of course,
doesn't explain the wings, but
no, it doesn't.
It's certainly an interesting idea. I think they did. Somebody else postulated that for another very famous sighting. I'm trying to remember the name of it right now, but the name escapes me. But perhaps it'll come to me at some point. But interesting, and of course John Keel had his particular theory about the paranormal events that were going on there, and Mothman in particular, which involved what he termed ultra-terrestrials or
Yeah,
beings
he's seen
that
a lot
live
of the
like
UFOs and stuff. You know,
yeah,
he was into that too.
absolutely.
But yeah, it was the UFO stuff was just a daily occurrence. Everybody would just see the UFOs. It probably got to the point where people just, just really didn't pay much attention to them. There was a guy named Dave Payton who was a columnist for the Herald-Dispatch, which is in Huntington, West Virginia. And he came to the festival one year because he was here investigating all that stuff too. But he would write the columns for the paper, and he with the UFO sightings, he told us that he devised a system to keep track of when and where and what for all these statistics for the UFOs, and he said he just gave up because there was so many of them. He said he just lost count. There was just so many reports and stuff. And, but that was going on at the same time.
Yes.
Right there where I lived on 30th Street, there's an interview in there with Dolly Grady in that book. She was my neighbor, and she talks about driving into her driveway and seeing a silver saucer flying right over their house in broad daylight. And that was just a few doors down from our house. But she said it just followed her in her car, and then when she pulled in, it just went right over their house. And she said it was just plain as day.
Mm.
And some of the other neighbors were outside and saw it too. So really, really strange, stuff going on.
Yeah, and I think that's why Keel kind of like being so inclusive in what he was looking at kind of put all this together into a sort of broad-ranging theory,
right,
as to what was going on there. And there's certainly been other investigators that have been down there that have looked into the whole thing and have come up with various theories. But I think in the long run, I think the best we can say is that something really strange was going on down in West Virginia in the late 60s.
Yeah.
There is no question about it.
That lived there at the time, or that still live in Point, and they will talk about that. People were kind of on edge. They didn't know. Well, the grade schools, the elementary schools during this Mothman flap or whatever you want to call it, they wouldn't let the kids out during recess there for a while because they thought if it was a giant bird that it would come down and pick a kid up, fly off with them and stuff. So.
Yeah, we actually had stories. Some people would call them urban legends up here in Pennsylvania back in the 1980s about giant birds. And so there's one story about a kid who was picked up by a giant bird and actually carried for a short distance. And a lot of speculation.
That happened in Texas too, didn't it?
Yeah,
back
I believe
in '76 or whatever.
Yeah, there were a couple of other places. Yeah, and I think Texas was one of them. Yeah. Very, just anecdotally, anyway, just to throw that out there for you. And just an interesting little side note. But of course, we've talked about some of the weirdness surrounding Mothman and how it was connected with UFOs. And of course, that then would bring us to the nefarious Men in Black who showed up. And one of the more prominent figures involved with the Men in Black phenomenon was Mary Hyre, who was a reporter who did some of the initial reporting on the Mothman sightings and some of the things that were going on down there. Maybe you can give us a little background on that and tell us how that all developed.
Yeah, Mary Hyre was a reporter for the Athens Messenger, which is about an hour away from Point Pleasant, but they had an office in Point Pleasant. She was the lady that that had the weekly column called Where the Rivers Mingle or Where the Waters Mingle. Back then, you'd have Facebook or the website to get on and get all your information. So everybody trusted her, but she when all this Mothman stuff started happening, she put it in her columns. And that's how a lot of people kept up with the latest and greatest, sighting reports and things like that. But what happened was when John Keel caught wind of all this, he came to Point Pleasant. He told me he was in Kentucky, investigating a winged cat sighting, which, he just kind of laughed about. But he said that while he was there, he read over the wire about this gigantic bird creature in Point Pleasant. So he said, well, that's on my way back to New York. I'll stop there. But what happened was he ended up staying for months at a time. He stayed right there on 30th Street where I lived with Linda and her family. And they said, well, you don't need to be staying in a hotel all the time. Why don't you stay with us? So he actually kind of took up residence there with them. Then he would go back to New York, and he told me that he couldn't get anything done. He would go back to New York and try to work on stuff, and they'd call and say, we saw it again, you need to come back. And so he was just back and forth all the time. But he kind of joined forces with Mary Hire and some of the other witnesses and stuff, and they kind of, had these round table discussions and all this kind of stuff like that. But what started happening with some of those witnesses and Mary herself is they started, she had an office downtown in Point Pleasant. She started getting some visits by these men that were dressed in black suits, the black derby hats, the ties and sunglasses, things like that. And she kind of really didn't know who they were. They didn't really give her a lot of identification. Some people thought maybe they were from the military branch or CIA or FBI or something. But she said their behavior was real peculiar. She, in several interviews and things like that, she talked about how they would come into her office, and she noticed that when she looked at them, that none of them would blink their eyes. They would just sort of a cold stare. And their stance was, you're just causing a lot of panic by putting this stuff in the newspapers. Why don't you just kind of keep quiet about it for now? She would look out her window at night, see him sitting in a black car across the road, and even Linda and some of the other ones and stuff, we're talking about these people following. They'd look in the rearview mirror in traffic and see a car behind them with a couple guys in it. They really stood out, especially in a small conservative town, like Point Pleasant.
Absolutely.
My mother even had talked about seeing some of these men in black, which kind of caught me off guard because this was after my 2 books had came out, and my mother had came into the museum one day, and as you walk up the ramp in the museum, we have a mannequin standing at the entrance dressed like a man in black. And, a little plaque that tells a little bit about who they were and what people thought they were and things like that. But she came in the museum one day and she said, what's this supposed to be? And I said, well, there's men in black, blah, 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 And she goes, oh, I remember them. And I'm like, what are you talking about? She said, I remember seeing these men that dress like this and during this Mothman stuff. And I said, well, where did you see them? She said, down in front of Mary Hire's office. She said they were always out in front of her office, and I thought that was really weird, And then, of course, I said, you tell me that now after I finished that book, But, so they did stand out. People did, remember them, being in town and stuff. It's a real tricky area to get people to talk about it. One person in particular that kind of convinced me that this stuff was real was actually Mary Hire's niece, who still lives in the area. And I had known her for years and didn't realize that she was her niece. I knew who the lady was, and Mary practically raised her. She would stay with her Aunt Mary a lot when she was younger, when all this was going on. So I emailed her one day. I got her email address from somebody, and I just sent her an email. It was just a real simple yes or no question. And she knew who I was, from the festivals and the books and all that. And I just said, I'd like to know if this Men in Black stuff really happened. And she emailed right back, and she said it happened. And she said my aunt was very concerned. I think that was her exact words. Now, see, Mary died just about 4 years later after all this, of a heart attack. And she was pretty young. She was like 54 years old. She didn't have any kids. Her husband died before she did, so the communication line just kind of broke right there.
she had the niece that I talked to, and she had another niece who was an infamous Mothman witness. Her name was Connie Carpenter, and she saw it in broad daylight about 10 miles away from Point Pleasant, up near Mason, West Virginia. She's never granted an interview. I've tried to get to her, and she won't talk about it. So I know a guy who was at her house. She was about 18 years old when she saw it. It was in broad daylight, and when she came back to her house, a buddy of mine's brother-in-law was at her house staying all night with this girl's brother, and they were just young at the time. And he said she came in and was just, they thought something had happened. They thought somebody got hurt real bad or killed or whatever, because he said she was just hysterical. So they couldn't calm her down or anything, and he said it scared him, because he said she was just out of control.
Wow.
So that's a first-hand account right there of how upset and scared some of these people were.
Absolutely. Some of them probably more scared by these men in black than they were about encounters with Mothman or some of the other things.
And the story goes on with her. I don't know if you've ever seen the documentary, Search for Mothman. That was one of the first ones that came out. Sony Pictures financed it. It was sort of a sister project to the movie. And they had, John Keel was on there. But they had Connie Carpenter's boyfriend at the time. He still lives in this area. And they interviewed him, and he talked about the same thing. But what had happened one day is she was going to the mailbox at her house. He said she just clammed up. She wouldn't come out of the house and stayed in her room all the time. Well, one day she went down to get some mail out of the mailbox or whatever, and a black sedan pulled up, and a man got out and tried to pull her into the car, and he said they ripped her sleeve off of her blouse, just tore the whole sleeve off of her blouse. And he said after that it was really bad. He said she just wouldn't talk about it or anything. So if you ever get a chance to see that, of course they don't run it anymore, but we show it at the museum.
It sounds familiar. That story sounds familiar, but I don't know if I'm gonna have to look that up because I don't actually have a copy of it. So
that's
I think
one of the best ones because it has Marcella Bennett, it has John Keel. I mean, all those people. Some of those key witnesses. Now Linda's not on there, but it's a good one. And you had mentioned Eyes of the Mothman, too, the one that Matt Pulowski did.
Right.
Yeah,
that's the newest one that just came out, yes.
Yeah.
And you were in there as well, and you were involved in the production of that in some fashion as well, were you not?
Well, I just did interviews and stuff, That was about 5 years ago. It took him 5 years to finish that.
Wow.
He came here 5 years, and maybe 6 years ago. I remember when he first came, because he was really excited about doing it, and he got involved with some other projects and stuff, and it took him a while to finish it, and I had pretty much just written it off there about a year or two back, and I thought, well, it'll never happen, And he all of a sudden he emailed me or called me up, and he said, I've got it finished, And he came last year to the festival, and they premiered it, and it really, a lot of people were impressed by that documentary.
Well, I'll tell you, I have it, and I recommend it for people for a really good historical presentation of a lot of the things that were happening there. And, of course, you can see Jeff Walmsley in there talking about various aspects of the phenomenon as well. So
he covered all the bases on that. And it explains a little bit of everything that was going on and stuff.
Yeah, and so I can recommend that as well. That's called Eyes of the Mothman, and you can find out more about that at eyesofthemothman.com. And it's a good documentary. It is with a lot of information in there. And speaking about the documentary, since you brought it up, one of the things that they go into a lot is the Chief Cornstalk curse.
Right.
During like the first part of the documentary itself.
Yeah.
Maybe you can tell the listeners a little bit about that.
Well, Chief Cornstalk, like I said, Point Pleasant's rich in history, and back in the 1700s, I think it was, Cornstalk was a Shawnee chief that was murdered by some of the white settlers and stuff. Him and his son both, and over a land dispute right there in the Point Pleasant area and stuff, where some of these skirmishes took place and stuff. But history has it that they had come to an agreement, they backed out on it, got into an argument or whatever, and they shot him, killed him, and up on his dying breath, he said that this town will be cursed for 200 years after he died, and see, a lot of that stuff happened within that 200-year time frame. You had the Silver Bridge collapse, you had this Mothman stuff, you had the jail explosion, which a lot of people don't know about that. That happened in '76. That was 35 years ago. So you had a lot of weird stuff going on with that. Now, other people debate that whole cornstalk curse. Some people have said that all it was a stage play from the 20s that somebody had written, and it developed into this. Yeah, developed into a legend type thing. Every town has bad things going on and happen.
Sure.
I mean, it depends on who you talk to on that.
But Cornstalk was an actual character from history.
Oh yeah.
And he really was murdered there.
Yeah, he was. Now, whether or not whether or not there was somebody standing right beside of him and he said that, and it passed on to each generation or whatever, that would really be hard to prove. But but Pulowski's DVD does really cover that pretty good. But some people thought that with the bridge disaster and that other kind of stuff that it's always easy to blame something on a curse. I mean,
Sure.
So,
Are there people who like put a lot of stock in the idea of the curse, or is it something that's not really encountered too much?
I don't hear a lot of people talking about it all the time, but it's just one of those things. When something happens, it's Cornstalk's curse.
So it's kind of like a catchphrase type of thing,
Yeah, I mean,
like
at least with some of the locals, and even with Mothman, I mean, there's some of the locals that just say,
So they'll say, that's that Mothman again, or something like that.
Tongue in cheek and stuff.
Very interesting.
Something happens, and they'll say, the Mothman did it, or something, stuff like that.
Yeah. It's good. I mean, it's entered popular culture. So
yeah, it has. It's become a worldwide phenomenon, and that skeptics are fun. I mean, we had this last week there when Discovery Channel was there. Joe Nichols came in the museum.
Oh boy, here we go.
Yeah. We came in and see. Now we did Monster Quest there last year, and filmed some stuff. I did an interview with them, but I never, there again, I never met up with those guys. They probably come to me and think, oh, here's that guy who wrote them books and stuff. But he was in the museum last week, but I wasn't in there. Jeremy talked to him some, and of course the Monster Quest deal. He tried to debunk all the sightings as just hallucinations and people just kind of blowing things out of proportion and stuff like that. But there again, I'm not interested in standing around debating stuff for hours at a time on that, But there's been some. I've met a few interesting people and stuff. But
I'm sure, yeah. Well, for people who don't know, Joseph Nichol is a world famous debunker. He classifies himself as a skeptic, but in fact what he does is goes around and tries his damnedest to prove that anything that is not provable by science is simply impossible and the result of people's weird imaginations, hallucinations, and swamp gas.
He's made a career out of that.
Yeah, yes. He's very famous.
Really?
He shows up on the Discovery Channel and History Channel and all these shows to prove that everybody's crazy.
Well, who was the guy years ago, the great Randy or something? What was that guy's name?
James Randi, yeah.
Randy something. He was The
Amazing Randy, yeah.
That's him, yeah.
Yep.
I remember that name, but wasn't he one of those guys that a debunker or whatever?
Oh yes, he was very famous with PsyCop, the Committee for the Investigation of Paranormal something or other. But in actuality, it's just a debunking organization. They try to they try to portray themselves as being scientific, but in fact they're doggedly materialistic and deterministic. So anything that is not provable by regular scientific means is ipso facto not possible. So they go out of their way to prove that various things are impossible by their own, ideas of what science represents. They're all basically charlatans in my view. I believe in honest skepticism. I think people should approach things with an open mind. You shouldn't go in and just automatically accept, that aliens are coming here from some other planet and taking people into space and this kind of stuff. Just because somebody says so, obviously. I mean, you need to be a skeptic about things. But those people are not skeptics. Joe Nickell is not a skeptic. He's a debunker, and a debunker is someone who goes out of his way to disprove anything that doesn't conform to his idea.
A party pooper.
Yeah, absolutely. Much so. So he seems like a really nice guy, but I just don't. I just don't like what he does, and I'm not afraid to say so. And James Randi was in that same camp as well.
Yeah, I remember that name.
And he came to prominence debunking Uri Geller, if you remember Uri Geller.
That's the name. You're right.
Yeah,
that was back in the 70s, wasn't it? Or
yes,
80s?
it was. Yes, the late 70s and the 80s. Absolutely, and that's where he gained prominence. He used stage magician tricks to duplicate his spoon bending, and he could do it, but it simply was unimpressive. And again, just because you can duplicate something doesn't mean that the real thing isn't real. And I'm not trying to say one way or the other whether Uri Geller was the real deal, but the point of the matter is, I mean, if I could, fake a UFO sighting, that doesn't mean that real UFO sightings don't happen. Basically, my point. I mean, and he's trying to say because I can fake what Uri Geller did, that means that Uri Geller's not real, which is that's a failed argument, really. As far as it goes. But
I know what you're saying.
We're getting a little bit off subject there. Sorry about that. I could go on about supposed a long time because they really get on my nerves, because they're so dogmatic about their approach. It's just crazy. Yeah. Well, let's see. What did I want to ask you? You said earlier that, if I remember correctly, that you've never had any kind of experiences yourself when it comes to like Mothman or anything unusual happening down there in West Virginia.
Oh, really?
No. Okay. And that's kind of bizarre for me a little bit because I find that people who do investigative work and these sorts of things usually have a lot of strange phenomenon that attaches to. And you had talked about John Keel earlier, and certainly John Keel had a whole bunch of strange phenomenon attached to him whenever he started to investigate UFOs, and he came to West Virginia. And you had mentioned the weird phone calls and things like that.
Yeah.
And we had also talked earlier about the movie, The Mothman Prophecies, with Richard Gere, and I had mentioned in the introduction how they kind of confused the two characters of Intrude and Mothman. It's kind of fused them into one for the movie, and you can see shades of different characters in that movie. Like you said, with John Keel and Mary Hyre joining together, it was sort of like Richard Gere's character joining up the police. The woman in the police down there, and it was set more in
modern day times. It kind of threw everybody off. They were looking for a, more of a thriller type monster movie and stuff like that. But I remember asking Keel about the movie and what he thought and everything. He didn't really say a whole lot about it. I think he probably just cashed his check and didn't say a whole lot about it. He told me that the way that movie came about was there was a guy out in Los Angeles, Richard Hatem, I think was his name, and he was the guy who adapted this screenplay took the book and adapted it to the movie. But I guess he suffered from insomnia. He was always up walking around looking in bookstores all night long, and he found that Mothman Prophecies book. And then he adapted it to a movie and stuff. And but yeah, you know, there's things in the movie like was it Alexander Leak, the guy in the movie?
Yeah.
Which is Keel spelled backwards.
Yes. A lot of little like inside jokes.
Yeah. It took you a while to figure that stuff out, but
yeah. I bet you get a lot of people who come to like the museum and stuff, and they probably base a lot of their information off of that movie, and
yeah. It's hard to explain to them too.
Right, and they're kind of confused about this idea of Mothman and Indrid Cold and anything like that. Have you ever had an opportunity to look into the whole Indrid Cold business with Woody Derenberger?
Well, I talked to Keel about that a little bit. You know, he told me about, you know, he'd went and interviewed him and talked to him and stuff. You know, but that happened only just an hour from here.
That was in Parkersburg, right?
Yeah, Parkersburg, Mineral Wells. Matter of fact, we were up that way there last week, right there on Route 77. I don't know exactly where all that happened, but you know, because Keel's, you know, there's a couple chapters in his book that dealt with all that and everything. There was so much going on, you know. He was you know, looking into that and Mothman stuff, the other UFO stuff, and everything. But you know, people do see that movie and they think, you know, they'll walk into the museum and you know, want to know about, you know, did anybody ever die or get killed or anything like that in the movie? You know, there was, you know, the one guy by the tree and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
He whenever they started filming that movie, I had my record store at the time. He come walking in the store. He was on his way to film and up there at Tanning. He just comes walking in the store one day, and Donnie, the guy that I wrote that first book with, you know, he knew him. He knew who he was from Armageddon, the movie Armageddon, and
yes.
What was the football movie? Remember the Titans? Remember he was the coach.
Yes.
And he just comes walking in there, and he looks just like he does in the movies. And Donnie's like, "That's Will Patton." And I was like, "Who's Will Patton?" He's like, and he heard us. And he turned around. And he's like, "Hey, what's up?" You know. And he said, "I'm on my way to." He goes, "I wanted to stop in the town where it really happened and look around." And you know, we talked to him for a while, and Donnie even drove him up to the TNT area and showed him around up there and stuff.
No, isn't
he was
that
real
cool?
nice. Yeah, he was real nice. You know.
Well, he seems like a genuine kind of guy. I mean, you can't
a
really
lot in person like he is. The characters, he's real soft spoken. You know, talks real soft and everything, and just real friendly. And I guess he lives in North Carolina, and talks about, you know, he likes to write and things like that, and you know, just a real down to earth person and stuff. You know, but
that's cool.
You know, I wouldn't have known him unless Donnie had mentioned that and stuff. You know.
So he's getting into character a little bit by coming down.
Yeah, he was.
Checking it out.
I guess he's just kind of walking around, and we should have took some pictures that day. Now Keel came in there a few times too, because I remember I was out of town one day, and Donnie called me. He worked in the store for me and stuff, and we used to joke around with each other all the time when we wrote that first book. You know, about Keel. You know, John Keel's going to come in here one day, and you know, we're all going to be, you know, meet him and talk and all this and that. Well, he called me up on my cell phone one day. I was about an hour away, and he said, "Guess who's in here right now?" And I just laughed. I said, "John Keel." He goes, "Yeah, he's in here." And I was like, "You're full of it, you know." He goes, "He really is. I'm not lying. He is in here." And then I heard John Keel talking in the background. And he said, "Man, you missed it," you know. And I thought, how could I have missed that? And he said, "Well, he's staying all night in town, and he's going to come over and talk to you tomorrow." So I remember I went in the store the next day. I was like nervous, you know. I thought, "Oh man, you know, what am I going to say?" You know. So here he comes walking across the street, and he had his red and black flannel jacket on. He looked like a duck hunter. You know, one of those jackets, those duck
I know
hunters
exactly
wear.
what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, and he had one of those hats on with like the little. It's just like hunters wear, you know, with the little tassels on the side. And he comes walking in. I'm standing there looking at him, and he said, "Are you Jeff?" And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "You're in a lot of trouble." You know, just joking with me. So we stood and talked, and what was really cool is, he hadn't seen Linda since all that happened, that for at least 40 years. So I called up Linda and I said, you'll never, Linda really looked up to him. He was almost like a grandpa to her and stuff. And I said, you'll never guess who's in the store, and it's John Keel. So we set up like a kind of reunion. And we got, they came down there and I took some pictures and stuff like that.
Oh, that's nice.
It was neat, yeah. It was kind of like a historical moment, but he came in and we talked and everything, and I had to get permission from him for the books, for the quotes on the books and stuff like that.
Right. Mhm.
And he would actually call me here at home, which really freaked me out. I'd come home and it'd be a New York call, and I would call him and leave a message sometimes on his voicemail, and he would always return my call. And my wife would be like, "Who are you talking to?" I'm like, "John Keel." And she's like, "What?" I'm like, "Yeah, So it was neat. I hated that, when he passed away, but he wasn't in very good health there and stuff. But
yeah, he was quite a character, and he was.
He was.
Very
I've got a bunch of stories, about him that just really, all good ones and stuff. He was always real cooperative with me, and he just had a quirky sense of humor. He was really dry as far as his sense of humor and stuff. He wasn't afraid to tell you, what his thoughts were on something, or whoever, or somebody, or whatever,
Right.
So.
Yeah, he was very forthcoming. Yes.
Yeah, he
talked
was.
about things. He just sort of laid it all out there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to ask you a little bit about like any more recent sightings of Mothman that have like attracted your attention.
Well, let's see. I get emails constantly.
I'm sure you do.
Yeah, there was actually one that came a few weeks ago from somebody who had reported. Well, they didn't really report it, but they saw something here in this area, and it was pretty detailed and stuff. But when you get so many of them, it's hard to validate a lot of that stuff. Unless you've got a lot of time on your hands and the resources and to sit down and talk with those people and stuff. What I knew would happen after that movie came out and after all the TV shows came out and all the exposure that I got, there'd be people coming out of the woodwork, with their quote, Mothman sightings.
Oh, sure. Mm-hmm.
So it just gets to the point where it's really hard to really verify stuff, and you don't want to, like you said, you don't want to doubt their story. Because I could be driving down the road tomorrow and run into something, and you'd hope that people would at least believe you. What I've kind of experienced, when I've done those books, is the people that don't want to talk about the stuff are usually the ones that are pretty genuine. The ones that won't return your calls, the ones that try to get out of sitting down and doing your interview and things like that. But you get everybody else sometimes is like they're a dime a dozen, Everybody's seen it, here's what I saw and things like that. But, from time to time in the museum, that's always a good place to meet people that have had, you can tell that they're not making stuff up. They don't really have anything to gain by telling you the story or anything like that. But I get emails all the time, usually daily. We do try to put those on the website. That website is just a monster within itself, trying to keep it updated. And
I'm sure you
all that.
Yeah, I'm sure you probably get a lot of traffic through there.
Yeah.
In fact, I looked at the one counter and it was like 1 million or something like that for.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so you get a lot of visits there.
It's hard to keep up with it and stuff.
I'm sure. Do you do all the web work yourself, or?
Well, we do the updates and stuff. I usually have to hire a 16-year-old kid to come in and show us how to do all the stuff, but we're getting better with it. It's just time is always the worst enemy.
Oh my God! You telling me, Jeff? Jeez.
Yeah.
Oh,
I teach full time,
I was just going to ask you. Yeah, I was just going to ask you about that. You actually have a full-time job.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't realize that most people who are in this sort of business, do paranormal research and things like that. They actually have another full-time job that they actually do, which, you know, really, it really does, you know, in my mind, it shows a lot of passion for these people, you know, like yourself, who have a full-time job that they do that earns them a living so they can have a place to live and pay their bills and stuff like that. But they still have the time to put into doing things like this, to do investigations into things.
It's a unique position. I mean, I always, you know, thought when I had those record stores, I thought, you know, nothing can really beat this. I mean, you know, you come as you go and as you want, and get all the latest CDs and all those promo CDs they send you for free, and all this. Get to meet rock stars and stuff like that. And I thought this is really cool. But you know, there again, the music industry took a nosedive, but I ended up going back into, you know, I have a background in art and design and music and all that. So the graphic design deal is, you know, of course you have to put up with 9th and 12th through 12th graders sometimes. But, you know, that has its moments. But and then the museum and all that is just sort of like, you know, it's almost like being in a record store again, because you still have that uniqueness to it and everything. And it's kind of neat. You know, there's everybody that walks through the door there's different. I mean, you know, we've met so many different people, and we get people that come back on a regular basis. I mean, you know, they come in, you know, every month or two they'll drive back and come in, and some of the film crews that's been in there, you know, Japanese film crews, Australian film crews, Italian film crews. I mean, it's really been kind of neat.
Do you know of any other projects that are going on besides the Discovery one that you were telling us about earlier?
Well, that's the latest one. There again, I get a bunch of emails, you know, from different places. I knew the Monster Quest one would be a big one. That was last year. We did that. Now the Discovery Channel deal, when they came in, I really didn't talk to them. That show it's a 30-minute show, and they feature 3 different subject areas. So it's probably only going to be 8 minutes of, you know, about the Mothman. You know what I'm saying? Because they're going to have commercial breaks and all that. Yeah. But they had Joe Nickel. I know they talked to him. They talked to Lauren Coleman. They brought him in they flew him clear down here from Maine, I guess is where he's at. And that Ken Gerard. Those guys are all cryptozoologists, though. You know, so
Lauren Coleman is very well known as a cryptozoologist.
Yeah, so he was on it, but they didn't talk to me, and that was fine. I mean, you know, a lot of times, you know, I'll sit down and do an interview with them and stuff. But you know, that's fine. I mean, I do enough of it anyway. But as far as any major projects coming up, I'm sure there'll be more. I mean, they just keep coming, and of course there's a lot of independent ones. You know, the college groups that come in, and I did one with. I've lost track. There's been so many of them I've done. You know, and I'll see myself on TV, and I'll be like, I don't remember even doing that. It's weird. I was like, when did I do that? You know, it's on YouTube or something. I'm like, I don't. It's like it's another person. Is that a doppelganger or talking, you know, to them? And it's like, I don't even remember talking to them about that or answering those questions and stuff.
Wow.
So, it's weird.
Yeah, it is weird. Maybe you'd like to, if you could, maybe you could tell us, give us a couple of interesting anecdotes or stories that maybe you haven't talked about recently or in other interviews that you've done with people. Let's see. There's so many different ones. You know, I've got an email from somebody over in the Middle East somewhere who claimed to have seen this thing, and he just kept badgering me and sending me emails and all this. And then, you know, it got to where he was threatening me for not putting it on the website. Oh, jeez.
You know? He was like, so you don't want to know the truth, you know, that's fine, you know, blah, blah, blah. I had an email there a few weeks ago, a guy from Germany who was wanting to order one of my books, and I told him, you know, we ship in the U.S., but it's more to ship it overseas. So, we'll try to get you a shipping rate. And he got impatient and emailed me back and said, keep your stupid book and all this and that.
Oh, jeez.
One of the stories I don't always tell, but when Keel came to town for one of the festivals one year, this kind of just shows his dry humor and stuff. But we were it was the year that they had the big hurricane somewhere, and it was raining the entire week. So we didn't have the museum at that time, so we were having it inside of where the museum is now. The people that own the Low Hotel let us use a couple of the storefronts to have it inside. And a couple nights before, he arrived in town and was staying at the Low Hotel. But we were in there working and trying to get everything ready. But we had the TV monitor in there playing that Search for Mothman DVD that I was telling you about, which he's all over it. He's on it and stuff. And there must have been about 10 or 12 people that were in there that had arrived early from out of town that just kind of were hanging out, while we were in there working and stuff. So they're all sitting there watching the DVD, and just like, they're just riveted to the screen, And he comes in, and they all knew him. He comes walking in and sits down and is watching it with them. And just kind of reminds you like our grandpa with his grandkids, they're all sitting there watching this documentary. Just, you could hear a pin drop, They watch the entire DVD, and as the credits start rolling up at the screen, they're all sitting there, and they're just waiting for him to say something, And he just stands up and looks at him, and he goes, "What a load of crap," like that, and walks off. And they all just started laughing, because they knew who he was. And I thought that was funny. I was standing there when he said it. He just looked at me and he goes, "What a load of crap."
That's classic.
But he was people really, they treat him with respect. He signed books there during the festival that one day, and I mean, he must have been there for 5 hours.
Wow.
We set him down to the table, and he signed books left and right and stuff. And he would sign this one person, I can't remember who it was. Their book was just all torn and tattered, and the guy probably had read it 100 times, page to page. And when John Keel signed it, I can't remember the guy's name. I think it was like Bill or something. And he come up to me and he goes, "Look, John Keel signed my book." And I'm like, "What are you writing?" It said, "Bill, it said take better care of your books, John Keel." So, he was really a quick-witted,
Yeah,
but,
I'm sorry I never had a chance to meet myself, because he has a reputation of being a really interesting character. So
he came to town to dedicate the statue. The statue there that's right there where the park is downtown, the famous Mothman statue. And they made a big media event out of it and everything. Comes time for him to pull the big black cloth off of it. They're going to let him do it. And they can't find him. And he's about 3 doors down at the little diner there eating his breakfast, So they're like, they said, "Jeff, you need to go down there and tell him they're ready to have him unveil the statue." Because everybody's waiting. They got the film crews there and all the TV crews. So I walk in there, and he's sitting there at the little bar thing there with the stools, and he's eating. And I'm like, "Now how do I do this?" So I just walk up and I'm like, "Mr. Keel, they're ready for you to unveil the statue." And he said, "You'll just have to tell them that I'm eating, and I'll be there when I finish my breakfast." And I'm like, "What?" He said, "You tell him that I'll be there when I finish." So I had to go back and said, "He'll be here in a minute." Finally, here he come walking around the corner and stuff.
Quite fascinating.
Yeah.
Very interesting guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. So, well, we have about 15 minutes left here. And
you had mentioned something in your email too about the guy that worked with Pellington.
Yes.
I caught wind of that. Of course, I thought it was a joke at first. Maybe it's not. I don't know.
Well, this
I mean,
guy actually, well, I'll clue people in that are listening. I'm glad you brought that up, Jeff.
Yeah.
I completely forgot about it, getting all wrapped up in the stories here. But there was a guy named Masler who was involved with the filming of Eyes of the Mothman. He was like an assistant camera operator.
Yeah, I
or
remember
like
it.
Yeah, it was something along those lines. But he was involved with the in the production of Eyes of the Mothman, the documentary, and apparently this guy had been sought by the police for stalking Ivanka Trump, and it was
Donald Trump's daughter, right?
Yes.
Okay.
She's pretty good looking too.
Yeah, his wife's Ivana, right?
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
So there might be some confusion there about people, but yeah,
it'd be the daughter.
Yeah, it was his daughter, Donald Trump's daughter.
Yeah.
And a video appeared on YouTube, and it was actually Andy Colvin who pointed me to that. He posted it on his wall on Facebook.
Yeah.
And I took a look at it, and I'm like, what the heck is going on here?
I know.
And then we found out that he actually worked on the film. And he basically does like a confession where he claims that his stalking of Ivanka Trump was actually caused by the Mothman. He blames Mothman for it.
Yeah.
And I guess at the time he was filming that, he was actually wanted in New York, I think. And
really?
and if you look online, you can actually find some information where it shows that he was either arraigned or arrested.
Oh.
Yeah. If you do a little look,
it's not made up then.
No, it's not. And what I found was really strange about that was because it was right about at the same time, and this is how these weird coincidences usually happen, if you want to call it a coincidence. It was right about the same time that Donald Trump was talking about maybe running for president. And seemed like it was really weird because here he is saying that he's thinking about running for president, and then all of a sudden his daughter and this whole Mothman thing and stalkers and everything else, and the name gets more coverage in the media and things like that. And I just thought it was weird, and like you, I thought this sounds like a crazy hoax, but in actuality, but in actuality, it appears to be true because I actually read a couple other news accounts where he actually was arrested or arraigned or something like that for actually stalking her. So yeah, and I don't even know the story. I mean, as far as like what actually he was doing or anything like that, I didn't look into it that much. I just thought it was a really bizarre sort of coincidence that up with all of it. Yeah.
I've not. Matt's never mentioned it. I mean, I get emails from him from time to time, and he stays pretty busy with different projects and stuff. But
well, actually,
I do remember that guy.
That was another. Did he seem strange to you at all?
No, not really. I mean, I just remember, Matt, and he had a couple guys with the cameras and one with the sound, and
if you actually go to Redline Cinemas, that's the company that produced the film. If you actually go to their website, on one of the links there from their main website, they actually have a press release style notice on there about that guy.
Oh, do they?
Yes, they do. Yeah, in which they basically say we didn't have anything to do with this, and we're sorry for any whatever that it came as a result of it. So it does appear to be like a real thing, and it just seemed really odd to me. And I did want to ask you if you were aware of that or any of the information behind it, because it was just a really strange thing.
Yeah, I did see some of the video and stuff, and there again, nothing really surprises me sometimes, but I haven't talked to Matt about it. I know, when the DVD came out and stuff, I talked to him about, where to get it and all that kind of stuff. I guess it's on Netflix, I think.
Oh, I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah, I didn't check myself. I actually bought a copy off of Tanya Dernberger, who was distributed.
Okay.
Well, I had her on my show a couple weeks back where she was talking about Indrid Cold,
Right.
and
Right.
her father. Yeah. So I bought a copy of the DVD off for her because she had it for sale. So yeah, it was, and I had a chance to look at it. And it's very well done. It's very well done.
He did a really good job on it.
Yeah, it's very high production quality, and that's not all that common for documentaries of this type to find high production quality and
right.
You know,
he's fairly young too. I mean,
he is.
That stuff, you know?
Yes, he is, and so you know, in the final minutes that we have left here, I want to tell everybody once again, for information on Mothman, please check out Jeff's websites to find out information about the Mothman Museum, the Mothman Festival, and other information on Mothman from the three websites, mothmanlives.com and mothmanfestival.com and mothmanmuseum.com. And I think all three of those are interlinked as well, are they not, Jeff? Yeah. And on mothmanlives.com, there is a place where, as I said before, you can click on, in the little menu there, it says sightings, so you can read some sighting reports that people have reported to Jeff through the website. You can find out about Point Pleasant, some of the history there. You can find out some information about Mothman and the museum, and there's also a place where you can buy books and merchandise. And as I said, Jeff's books are also available on Amazon.com if you prefer to go through that route. And again, Jeff is featured in Eyes of the Mothman, which is the most recent documentary that was done on Mothman. And you can find information about that at eyesofthemothman.com. Do you sell the DVD through your website?
We have it at the museum. We just haven't got the link put on there yet, but we will. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So in the future, if you know, if you're looking to get the DVD at some point down the road, you might want to check through Mothman Lives or through one of the other websites there of Jeff's, and you should be able to pick up a copy of that documentary through there as well. And
we
I'm
sold
sure
out of them when we first got them in, so I had to reorder more of them today.
Oh, very good, very good.
Yeah.
Well, it's always good. It's always good. So hopefully in the future you'll continue to get more and more interest in the festival and in the museum and your work. And I want to ask you just briefly in the last couple minutes here. Do you think that with all of the renewed attention that Mothman has been given by the various documentaries and all the stuff that people have done about it, do you think that at some point in time we'll have an answer for what Mothman is? Or do you think this is something that's going to remain an enigma?
I think it will remain an enigma. I mean,
you do?
It's been 45 years, and you know, I don't think anybody's going to be breaking out and coming out and saying, you know, because there's so many different theories and you know, different witness accounts and things. It'll be tough. I mean, unless something pops up, you know, somewhere else, or you know, over in another country or something like that. You know, then again, you don't know if that's the same thing that people were encountering here in the 60s or 70s or whatever, you know.
Right.
I don't think it's really limited to just the 60s, but that's when most of the stuff was going on, you know, got most of the attention. But I think it'll be a tough one to crack, you know, as far as really pinpointing exactly what it was. I think that's part of the beauty of it, though, because, you know, it just keeps people's curiosity. It keeps them looking for answers and stuff, you know.
Yes.
It would be kind of boring, I think, if somebody solved it, you know.
Actually, you know, that you put it that way, I think it would be. You know,
yeah,
even if it was a really, even if it was a really weird answer, it still would be mundane, you know, to have it solved. Just to say,
what those people saw was not the norm. I mean, you know, you know, when I talked to those people, I knew that they were describing something that really had them puzzled, still does.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them they just kind of given up and trying to figure out what it was and stuff. But it scared them. I mean, it really shook them up.
Yes. And if you read, and like I said, I have a copy of Mothman Behind the Red Eyes. I highly recommend this as a resource for anybody who wants to do research into Mothman, because it does reproduce a lot of the original newspaper articles. It has interviews with people who had sightings, and it has a lot of information. So it's sort of like a really good guidebook for anybody who wants to do further research into Mothman.
That's what it was intended for.
And I think it really fits the bill, Jeff. And
cool.
I want to thank you for coming on the show today.
Okay,
and,
I appreciate it.
Hey, and maybe
we'll
have
make it to the festival.
Hey, I want to meet you.
We'll meet up. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to meet you down there. And like I said, I'm gonna do my darndest to make sure I get down there this year. And actually, September 18th is my birthday, so it'll be kind of like a
well, that'd be a
nice
good
little
present.
Yeah, it'll be a nice little birthday
have
present.
To announce that to all 5,000 people when you're there.
Maybe I can come on the fly interviews down there with people. Maybe do a little compilation thing.
Yeah, that's what a lot of them do when they come.
Hey, that would be nice. It would give me a chance to meet a lot of the people that are in the field, which would be really great for me.
Yeah, network. Yeah.
Okay, Jeff. Thanks a lot.
Okay.
I appreciate your time today, and thank you for filling us in on the Mothman. And we'll catch up with you again. I'll be in touch with you, and
all right.
I'll meet you down there at the festival, hopefully.
Okay. All right. Look forward to it. All right.
Okay.
See ya.
Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.
Okay, that was Jeff Walmsley. And again, let me remind you that his books can be purchased from his website at mothmanlives.com, and you can link to all the other websites through that one. mothmanmuseum.com and mothmanfestival.com. You can also find his books on amazon.com. And of course, I had a couple shows with Andy Colvin as well. Andy Colvin is a great researcher into Mothman as well. His books can be found on amazon.com too. And Jeff and Andy know each other as well. So. But Jeff's book, Mothman Behind the Red Eyes, is a really great resource for doing your own investigation. If you want to follow up on any of this stuff or look into it a little bit deeper, you can use that as sort of a guide, and then you can go and get some more works like John Keel's and Andy Colvin's, and so many other authors that have looked into this. It's just a really fascinating subject, the giant winged man with the glowing red eyes. And so I want to thank everybody for tuning in today, and remind you that I'll be back here next Friday, 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern Time, and I'll have another episode of The Stench of Truth here on Blog Talk Radio. And don't forget to check out my channel on YouTube. That's youtube.com/user/Tenebroust. Tenebroust. My show is also called The Stench of Truth on YouTube. Mostly talk about politics and economics and that sort of thing over there, but every once in a while I get into a little bit of the occult and paranormal, which is what this show is all about. I want to thank everybody in the chat room and all the people listening for tuning in today. And also have a new blog, which you can find at Tenebroust, Tenebroust- thestenchoftruth.blogspot.com, and I do symbolic breakdowns of movies and have various commentary on news and things like that. It's updated rather infrequently at the moment, but hopefully I'll be doing that on a more regular basis. So you join me